Hey, Sales Enablement Podcast listeners. This is Alastair Woolcock, co-host of the RevOps podcast. We have another special episode for you coming right up. So if you like what you hear, come and subscribe and join us at the RevOps podcast. Welcome everybody to this week's RevOps podcast. I'm Alastair Woolcock, Chief Strategy Revenue Officer here at Revenue.io. And today, pleased to be joined by Barry Traylor. Barry is with Sales Mastery and a longtime professional in the space, part of the Accenture luminary worldwide, as well as formerly a few of his companies. He has exited successfully in the sales, coaching, and training space, including with Miller Heiman, which was acquired by Korn Ferry, and has a wonderful perspective on AI's impact in sales. Barry, it's fantastic to have somebody here with us today with your pedigree. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Alastair. It's good to be here.
So, Barry, for the audience, obviously you've spent a lifetime of getting the best out of sales and what is going on. And I was struck recently by a 2023 Coaching Impact report that you actually just published. And in there is this really fascinating numbers that we get to where you talk to how companies that adhered to a sales processes solution orientation prior to the downturn are now massively outperforming that of those that did not. And I just want to start there because we often heckle process in sales, right? We often heckle the repeatability. We often heckle those aspects of it and go, well, it's the art of the sale. It's the conversation. It's all of those things that really matter. But what you're suggesting here in the research that you've done is that the outperformers right now are those that actually adhere very strictly to a process and they adhere to coaching on that side. And your results are pretty interesting. Like just before I hand this over to you, the stat that really popped out for me was when we look at the win rates of those companies, it went from those that had ad hoc coaching and processes, 47%. Those with formal coupled with advanced technologies in the space, we're getting close to 60%. And I don't know of anybody right now that is a sales leader in this environment that wouldn't like to improve their win rates by at least 13 points. Mm-hmm. Fascinating research. So what is going on behind the scenes on those numbers?
Well, I think it's fair to say there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But I think it's also fair to say that when you net it out, you've probably hit on the three high points: process, augmented by or supported with technology, and coaching. And all three of those, I mean, they're like, I hadn't thought of this, but, it's an old metaphor, a three-legged stool.
Is it?
And, it's very stable when you have all three legs, and if any of them is shorter or missing, it's a problem. And
right.
The thing that we say about, I want to maybe temper the intro a little bit, because there's always this kind of push-pull. Is it art? Is it science? Art or science? And I don't feel those need to be mutually exclusive, for starters. And then the other thing that we say a lot is that, and you mentioned ad hoc and informal, it's not that you're unsuccessful when you operate in that way. It's that you're unpredictable when you operate in that way.
Right.
So there are people who operate, completely in the moment. They are 110% artistic, if you will. They do not want to be burdened with technology or data. They want to be completely present and in this moment with no restriction.
Right.
That can work. And there are plenty of people who've done really well in sales who have established and elevated great relationships over time without any technology whatsoever. It's not a model that scales well, and in most cases, it's not a model that predicts well. And that's the problem. When I would introduce that notion at sales meetings, I would always start, we have a video on our website it's called Making the Number. It's all about the number, right? And everybody will say yes to that. And then I'll show plots of two companies over 3 years. One's plus or minus 5%, the other's plus or minus 50%. They both made their number during that 3-year period. But if they were publicly traded companies, the plus or minus 5% would have 3 or 4 times the market cap of the plus or minus 50% because they're predictable. And the thing that most often determines that, or another way of looking at that, would be to say they have their processes under control.
So I hear you on the art coupling with the science. I wouldn't disagree with you there. But I think for a lot of people, we say we should institute a sales process. We say that we should have the trainings and the coaching components coming in there, but it's actually quite hard to systemize. It's quite hard to put that in. And again, if I just reference your own report here, one of the things you point out is that the companies that are beating quota, they're doing better, right? 76%, so over 3/4 have implemented a formal or higher sales process. So let's just double on the process word here for a second.
Uh-huh.
What are the sales processes that are working, and how heavy-handed are they in there? Like when you say they've implemented formalities and a higher sales process, are we talking they're excellent at their medic or medpic and challenger components or sense making, et cetera, and they've got it systemized across the company? What are you seeing that is different from the ones that are making it versus the ones that go, well, yes, we use challenger, and really they just use the lipstick version of challenger?
Well, I think there are 2 points to be made here. One is distinguishing or differentiating methodology from process. So challenger, strategic selling, customer-centric selling, whatever, fill-in-the-blank selling are methodologies. And what you get with methodologies are a common vocabulary,
right,
and some tools to use that are consistent, shared among the group. Process is what people do and how well they do it. And we could spend a lot of time talking about both of those, but just to make the point that they are different. I think the thing that when we've looked at it, we've been looking at it now for over 20 years, when Jim first defined 4 levels of sales process back in 2000 for an article he wrote for Forbes, was ad hoc, informal, formal, and I forget what he called it. We changed it to dynamic some number of years ago. But in any event, as you move across those, Alastair, the things that are changing is more coaching, more collaboration, more technology, and increasingly more analytics. And so the way we would define them is ad hoc or random. Basically, everybody's doing their own thing.
Right.
We hire good people and we get out of their way, which is really, in our view, just benign neglect from a management standpoint. But, it is a philosophy. Informal, we have a sales process. People are exposed to the thing you're saying is kind of the lipstick version. They're exposed to it. They're expected to use it, but that is not monitored. It's not reinforced. It's not enforced. Formal, they are exposed to it. It's the way we do business around here. It's the SOP. Some people would say it's our Bible, and they can be nearly religious about it. And it is reinforced. It is enforced. It is baked into the day-to-day. And dynamic, you now have analytics and more technology being applied to it. Those were the definitions we used from 2007 when we introduced the sales relationship process matrix, the SRP matrix, up until last year in our Harvard article when we introduced and relabeled the 4th level agile sales process and added a 5th level, which is customized. And that's really looking at the introduction of AI and ML, machine learning, to augment process, to augment all the rest of it. So I think consistency and collaboration and coaching are the kind of the watchwords as you move up in levels of process implementation.
And what's interesting about that, as I reflect on similar research you saw back at Gartner in the day, you would find that top performing sales managers were very adept at helping reps with regionalization. They're very adept at one-to-one coaching around deals, the negotiation, what was needed, kind of the mechanics of the situation. So the situational awareness piece was very high among them. And they knew how to coach that. They knew how to scale that. They spent a disproportionate amount of their time thinking and acting that way with their sellers. It's good. On the flip side of that, the bottom 25 percentile spend a lot of time in reporting. They spend all the time looking at the forecasts, and when here's the report that goes to my boss, that goes to his boss or her boss. And I think this is a very big challenge. It's very hard. When we talk methodologies, we talk process. In an environment like we're in right now, you have a lot of people that naturally turn inwardly very quickly because they're responding to the reduction in pipeline. They're responding to the difficulties in the market that are present right now, right? Deal cycles are extending. They're going to add the same headcount they thought they were. They still get to deliver big numbers. It's going to be a hard few years for folks. And in that, it is really this idea that, look, this is where a good, well-defined process actually stops you from falling back into the trap of inward analysis, in my opinion. And it's going to allow you to actually follow a process that actually supports the reps in terms of the engagement side that is germane to top-performing sales teams, right? So the process actually mirrors the steps and actions that need to occur on engagement and around support. And I think when you think of it in that way, it doesn't matter so much then the methodology I'm using of MEDDIC, MEDPIC, Challenger. That's how I communicate. That's how I'm going to articulate value to the market and engage with clients. But the process actually gives me the repeatable result I want. And it does seem that your research corroborates that thinking.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question of that. The thing that I think I absolutely agree with you describing, the upper 20% and their situational awareness, and I would say process focused. I would also say consistency versus the bottom 20% focused on reporting. But I'll tell you a story. Long before CRM, a VP of sales that we worked with was just rabid about the numbers. And he was kind of an Excel maven. And so every month, he had the numbers on each of the reps. And every month he would send them their numbers and the team aggregate numbers. And it was a very short email that went to each rep. He said, please send me your reply, not longer than 3 paragraphs, telling me what these numbers mean to you. And if I don't have that by the end of business on whatever day, I will write you a 1-paragraph email telling you what these numbers mean to me. And what he really was doing was not focusing on reporting. He was forcing people to think about the numbers they were putting in the report.
Yeah.
And I think that may be another difference between the top and bottom 20%, is they're actually asking themselves, what does this mean? What are these numbers telling us? And the answer is, they're not telling you anything unless you think about them.
Yeah.
That's the difference between data and information. So I think that it's not just process. I think process is the way you consistently aggregate or accrue numbers so we're all measuring in the same units. That's what process gives you. But thinking about and really analyzing what are the numbers saying is a whole other part of the game.
It really is. And there's a dizzying amount of data we're now able to collect around this, right? We can look at all kinds of engagement information, behavior information. We can look at different attributes. We can look at things that are happening in calls, after calls. A lot of these things are there. I think often it's the synthesization of that down to the most basic things that are going to drive the action. And I would suggest to people, if you're looking at more than, I would say, 6 items at any given time, you're probably not going to make a sensible decision, right? We for all of the fantastic dashboards I've seen in the world, the most simple ones are the most effective, right?
I think there are a couple of things. Number one, we've been saying this for a long time. People are drowning in data and they're dying of thirst for actionable information.
Yes.
And so when you look at the pyramid of knowledge, the base is data. One level up is information. Another level up is understanding. Another level up is knowledge. And the top level is wisdom. And right now, people are just drowning in data. And I think understanding which are the 6 gauges that we should be looking at that really matter. requires perspective and wisdom over time.
And in what you're seeing right now, as people are pivoting with the market conditions, are there any particular metrics that are jumping out at you more dominantly than others right now?
Well, I think there are a few that, have caught headlines. I think the layoffs is a metric that's catching my attention. And you mentioned people who thought they were going to be adding headcount in art. Throwing bodies at it, I don't think is useful. One of the metrics that's deeply disturbing to me right now is the churn rate in SDRs and BDRs, as an example. I think that's just mind-blowing. I think it's just terrible. I think win rates are always something people look at, but, if we want to borrow a page from Jolt, we can really look at no decision rates. No decisions have been kind of the winner over the last few years. It used to be when we looked at the outcome of forecast deals, won, lost, and no decision, it was generally 50, 30, 20. They won half the deals, lost 30% of the competition, and 20% went to no decision. And the no decision keeps creeping up. It's upwards of 25% now, which means 1 out of every 4 deals that went through the entire sales buying journey dragged along, and the resources and energy and emphasis that was given those the entire way wound up with nothing for anyone. I mean, that's really something. And, to have that grow from just under 20%, it was like 19%, up to 25. I mean, that's a 25% increase.
Yeah.
That's big.
I've seen similar types of things as well. The no decision piece, a lot of people struggle with right now, right? Some put it down to deals just extending or things like that as well. But what would you say to an enterprise today where they are trying to shore that up and not have that creep into their business? Like, what are some of the tips for dealing with the no decision side?
Well, so there are 2 things. One has been forever, and the other is for this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
The first is, this is a bet that I have been making for years and years and years with rooms full of VPs of sales. And my bet is, I will bet you my house right now, you have good people working hard, trying to get business you don't want. And I still have my house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they nod their heads, and it's like, what are we doing here, man? Are you kidding me? It's like, whether you call it ICP, ideal customer profile, we call it perfect prospect profile, whatever you call it, what is it?
Yep.
And, are you holding that up against all the leads that you're generating and qualifying against that or not? I mean, come on. And it's like, well, here's our ICP, but basically anybody who'll fog a mirror right now is, like a hot ticket. Come on, man. And so this is not new. Qualify. Todd McCarthy, he's in search now, but when he was VP of sales, his coaching was always look for exit to door. He was always trying to find out why we should stop these rather than drag them along.
Yep.
And so that's my number 1. Number 2, we have a paper on this, happy to share with anyone or give you the link, you can share it. We call not the first rodeo, won't be the last. Right now, a lot of people are saying, are we in a recession? Are we going into recession, hard landing, soft landing, whatever? Have we seen anything like this before in the pandemic? No, we've never seen anything like this before. Well, have we or haven't we? Well, 15 years ago, we had a thing called the Great Recession, another black swan event.
Yep.
And the thing that we saw there that served people well, number 1 was really focusing on existing accounts. So the number 1 objective this year still is new accounts, new logos. But the number 1 thing people really made sure they took care of back in the last black swan was existing business, and then can they expand their footprint within those accounts. So I would say that's another thing to focus on. And the final thing I'll say about this, I could go on for some time, is we have written, I think this is in the same paper as you were talking about, companies that were down at the lower level of the sales performance scorecard. If they continued to do in tough times what they did when things were good, they got crushed. But if they moved up to sort of at least formal sales process and a higher level of relationship, they basically held steady. The folks that were at that point to begin with and were doing well when things went south. If they continued to do what they'd always done, they got crushed. But if they went to a higher level of process and higher levels of relationship, they again held steady. So,
Yeah.
those would be our recommended guidelines for, how to weather this storm.
And I will summarize that back. When I think of it, the ICP and the segmentation side is hugely important, right? Be relentlessly qualifying. Qualifying isn't a stage 2 thing. Qualifying is until you've won or lost the deal.
Yes. Just let's say that again. Don't even say it different. Just say that again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, qualifying all the way through the funnel, every single stage until you win or lose. And that's important because the buying groups are big, right? And especially in the enterprise.
Yeah.
You can't just sell to a person and do BANT. I know I'm going to sound provocative to some folks here, but if BANT is your methodology, stop it now, because it's one of the worst methodologies you could possibly use to actually qualify something to make it real. All right, you talk to somebody and they might have budget, approval, and need and timing, but it doesn't help when you have buying groups between the 9 and 13 people in an enterprise today.
I thought the A in BANT was authority, and if you actually have the right authority, it's okay. But most people have redefined the right authority as the highest person I can talk to.
Well, and bingo, and that's why it also goes. It fails so badly. We got to cover the other two, but there's just what we're talking about. That people often are single-threaded in their relationships, so they hear what they want to hear and they want to go do it. And I don't care if you're actually even touring all the way to a C level. Most C levels today are not going to make decisions in isolation on most things, right? As a collaborative approach, they bring others in. They may be a final decision maker or somebody, yes, that says I'm in or out, but nonetheless, it's just not a truism. And a friend of mine is Doug Boucher, wonderful analyst, works at Gartner Sales Leaders. He was just telling me a short time ago how during the pandemic that actually dropped, which is really interesting data, right? So during that pandemic period where everybody was at home wondering what was going on, you actually saw the volume of decision makers decrease, which it hasn't for years. It's been growing for years.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was you actually had everybody suddenly go, look, we got to make decisions in our business. We got to move ahead. So just open it up a little bit. And so that's literally what transpired. So the groups dropped down to about 6 people from their peaks of that were prior to that pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But today, literally spot check, I think in their last, they did a 6-month spot check, headed into 2023, it's actually at its highest levels nearly ever in terms of some of the biggest groups ever. So it's completely swung because now everybody's going, hold on, risk.
Yeah.
I don't want to have the risk right now. So because we're in a high risk, high stakes environment, you got a lot of people influencing on that. Hence, you better be always qualifying all the way through with all of the different constituents.
Okay, so 2 things you said. One, hearing what they want to hear. That's been described as listening with happy ears.
Yes.
It's hearing what you want to hear. Yeah, no. But to the point you were making, the number of decision makers actually went down. I believe that, but I also would be willing to push back and say, but I bet the level of the decision maker went up.
That's right.
During that same period. For example, we did a case study with an executive that prior to the recession had $2 million signature authority, and during the recession dropped down to below 50,000.
Right.
His title didn't change, but his signature authority sure did.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And as my partner, Nikki, likes to say, during a recession, the CFO becomes the CF no.
Yes.
Can I have no? And here's a no. No. So,
well, listen, this has been fascinating. I think the advice on focus on the ICP, relentlessly qualify people out. It is so key. Instituting a rigorous process to go with your methodology. Clearly, your data is showing that's improving win rates a lot right now. Right, 13, 16%. That's fantastic.
Actually, it's 13 to 16 points, which is more like 30%.
It's an extraordinary shift, right, when we think about that overall. But unfortunately, we are out of time right now.
Okay.
So what we'd love to do is have you back, and we'll have you on another episode on this as well. Is I also want to dig on some of the forecasting pieces here with you as well, right? It's all great. We've talked about how we go get, but once we're actually working things, what's going on there as well. But Barry Traylor, Sales Mastery, wonderful to have you with us. We look forward to having you back on a future episode.
Look forward to it myself. Thanks, Alastair.
Thanks, Barry. And for those listening in, please remember to like and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to phone in with your questions. We are live now and have done a couple episodes of live audience questions as well. You can reach us at 323-540-4777. That's 323-540-4777. And we'll see you next episode.